May the hearts that hear this story find wisdom in its journey, peace in its lessons, and hope in its turning points. May every struggle remind us that strength often wears a quiet face, and that justice, though delayed, never truly dies. Amen. Welcome to Mr. Favor Tales, where hearts heal and stories speak louder than words. Here, every tale is a mirror, reflecting the silent battles, the quiet victories, and the kind of power that doesn't shout, but changes everything. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe, because somewhere in these stories, someone finds their breakthrough. The CEO's downfall and the quiet genius's rise. It was never about the applause for Elena Gray. At Dunham Technologies, a towering titan in the world of clean energy innovation, people knew the names that sparkled on glossy magazine covers: Margaret Dunham, the iron-willed CEO who wore confidence like armor, and Jonathan Kim, the financial whisperer who could massage numbers into miracles. But behind every record-breaking launch, every five-star press release, and every visionary award, there was Elena, the woman who quietly made things happen while others took the bows. She didn't need the spotlight. She preferred the shadows. Elena's office sat 2 doors down from Margaret's, minimalist in design, white walls, organized files, 0 trophies. Her mind, though, was chaos contained. Algorithms danced behind her glasses. Contracts, coded with precision, filled her shelves. If Dunham ran like a well-oiled machine, it was because Elena understood the parts even the engineers didn't talk about. She wasn't born with a silver spoon or a recognizable name. She was born with questions, and the kind of mind that refused to rest until it found answers. And in the beginning, Margaret loved her for it. 10 years earlier, Elena had joined Dunham Technologies as a junior analyst. She was just 26, fresh out of MIT with a dual degree in engineering and business strategy. On her first day, she'd corrected a cost estimation error on a project that had already cleared 3 levels of approval. Margaret, then the newly appointed CEO following her father's sudden death, had marched into the analytics department demanding to know who'd refiled the correction. They told her it was the new girl. Margaret stormed into Elena's cubicle. Elena stood up. She didn't smile. She didn't flinch. "You think you know more than 3 departments, 2 vice presidents, and the COO?" Margaret asked. "No," Elena had replied, pushing her glasses up. "I just know math." That was the beginning. Over the years, Margaret promoted her ruthlessly, first to strategy advisor, then chief of internal operations, then special assistant to the CEO. A title that sounded like glorified scheduling but actually meant Elena was Margaret's fixer. They'd burn midnight oil over market entries. Elena could see angles Margaret couldn't. And when the board fought Margaret's boldness, it was Elena's logic that steadied her hand. "She's not flashy," Margaret once told the board, "but she's the smartest person in this building." And it was true. But intelligence doesn't immunize you from betrayal or love. Jonathan Kim was the third wheel of that strange triangle. Tall, elegant, with a polite smile that rarely cracked. He was Margaret's college friend. They'd done internships together back when Margaret still thought she'd take over the family's European division, not the entire company. When Jonathan joined as CFO, Margaret had placed him beside her like a trusted blade. But it was Elena who he truly admired. It started innocently, a late-night spreadsheet correction, a coffee outside HQ, a joke over someone's ego on the board. Then one night, during a financial review on the 9th floor, Jonathan leaned close to show Elena a chart, and she didn't move away. She just looked at him. For too long. For too deep. They didn't speak of it. But something began. It wasn't scandalous. It wasn't plotted. But it was private. And that's what made it dangerous. Margaret didn't suspect at first. She was too caught up managing market expansions and balancing boardroom politics. She leaned on Jonathan for financial stability and Elena for intellectual reinforcement. They were her dual anchors. But that changed one chilly October evening. Margaret had returned from a brutal investor dinner. She stormed into Elena's office, ranting about short-sighted shareholders and cowardly VPs. Elena listened calmly, offered her signature measured suggestions, and handed over a confidential report, a cautionary one about a proposed acquisition Jonathan had been championing. "Too risky," she'd said. "It's off books and built on inflated revenue assumptions." Margaret took the file but barely skimmed it. Jonathan said it's clean, she muttered. Elena paused. Did he show you the line item breakdown? Margaret narrowed her eyes. Did he show you? There it was. The first flicker of suspicion. Elena didn't answer. Not with a lie. But not with the full truth either. The next week, whispers started circulating. A competitor had somehow gotten wind of the acquisition plan. Confidential details, timelines, names. Margaret exploded. In the boardroom, she grilled department heads. But when eyes shifted toward Elena, the keeper of secrets, the room grew silent. I trusted you, Margaret had said coldly. Elena didn't defend herself, because to do that, she would have had to reveal how close Jonathan had been sitting, how many nights they'd spent reviewing numbers together, and how one of those nights, Jonathan might have left a file on the printer, a file someone could have accessed. But Elena wouldn't sacrifice him, and Margaret saw that silence as confirmation. What followed was a slow unraveling of loyalties. Meetings became colder. Margaret stopped copying Elena on key memos. Jonathan avoided eye contact during presentations. Elena, once central to every plan, began feeling peripheral. Still, she worked. She gave Margaret flawless expansion blueprints, designed a new data infrastructure for their European cloud servers, and renegotiated contracts that saved the company $18 million. None of it mattered, because once a seed of doubt is planted, no amount of proof can kill it. And the day of the quarterly investor presentation was approaching. On the morning of that meeting, Elena stood outside Conference Hall B, holding a slim folder. Risk assessment charts she'd prepared to strengthen Dunham's market confidence. Margaret walked past her, pausing only briefly. I don't need that, she said. Elena blinked. It's about the… I know what it's about. Margaret cut her off. Her voice was low, final. Save your genius, Elena. Today, I talk. You watch. And then, she walked in. Elena stood still, folder still in hand. Something in the air felt wrong. Not tense, not dramatic. Final. If you're feeling the tension rising, you're not alone. Don't forget to hit that like button if you're invested in Elena's story. And subscribe, because things are about to explode in that boardroom. The investor conference was packed. Dunham Technologies held its quarterly updates at the prestigious Crescent Hall Inn, downtown Chicago. High ceilings, soft gold chandeliers, walls padded for acoustics. Rows of chairs filled with investors, analysts, tech bloggers, and reporters created a low hum of chatter and anticipation. At the head of the stage, beneath a massive screen bearing the company's logo, Margaret stood tall. She wore her signature navy blue blazer, a silver brooch shaped like a phoenix pinned to the lapel. Everything about her exuded power, control, legacy. The crowd quieted as the lights dimmed. Good morning, she began. Her voice was clear, practiced. Dunham Technologies is proud to report another strong quarter. Revenue growth, market expansion, sustainability benchmarks. The crowd nodded. Phones clicked. Eyes scanned the handouts. But Margaret's tone shifted as the slideshow moved into projections. Specifically, a recently leaked acquisition plan. She paused. And Elena, sitting off stage with other senior staff, felt the hairs on her neck rise. Some of you may have heard whispers, Margaret said slowly, about a confidential deal, a plan that was compromised, exposed before it was ready. A murmur. Margaret turned, clicked to the next slide. But this morning, she said, we don't just address rumors, we address betrayal. Elena stiffened. And before she could process what was happening, Margaret turned toward the crowd and delivered the blow. It's with deep disappointment that I must inform our shareholders, Margaret announced that a senior member of my strategic team, Elena Gray, was found to have compromised our proprietary plans and abused her influence to elevate an internal relationship with the CFO for personal gain. Gasps. Real gasps. Flashes of cameras. Even the board members sitting near the stage looked stunned. Elena couldn't move. Effective immediately, Margaret continued, her voice clipped. Elena Gray has been terminated. Dunham Technologies has no room for conflict of interest, leaks, or dishonesty, no matter how brilliant the source may be. Then, to the shock of all, she let out a low chuckle, almost like a laugh, the kind that says, justice has been served. People turned in their seats, looking for Elena. There she was, still seated among her colleagues, face pale, folder on her lap. Some stared with pity, others with curiosity, and a few with open suspicion, as though a decade of loyalty had just evaporated in 5 sentences. Margaret didn't look back at her. She simply clicked the next slide and moved on with the presentation, as if she hadn't just gutted someone publicly. Elena stood, slowly. She didn't cry. Not yet. She didn't argue. Not here. But her eyes locked with Jonathan's. He sat frozen beside the finance team, jaw clenched, face unreadable. She searched for remorse. She found none. Outside the conference center, Elena walked into the freezing December wind, holding nothing but her coat and a slim folder that now felt useless. Security didn't escort her. They didn't have to. The message had been clear. She was out. Publicly. Permanently. Humiliated. She hailed a cab with shaking hands. The driver looked at her through the mirror. "You okay, ma'am?" She nodded. "Just drive." But as they pulled away from Crescent Hall, tears finally came. Not for the job, not even for the betrayal, but for the years she'd spent believing brilliance alone could protect her. That afternoon, while the media replayed Margaret's statement and financial forums buzzed with commentary about Dunham's internal shakeup, something quiet was stirring in the background. A junior engineer named Marcy forwarded an email chain to the board chair, Mr. Simmons. It included notes Elena had sent about the risks behind Jonathan's acquisition proposal, with timestamps, with warnings. Attached were spreadsheets she'd personally annotated, questioning the valuation and exposure levels. It was dated 2 weeks before the leak, 2 weeks before Margaret accused her. Mr. Simmons frowned. Something didn't add up. By evening, 3 more engineers, anonymously, submitted performance reports from the last quarter. Each one attributed major milestones, revenue leaps, and R&D breakthroughs directly to Elena's strategic interventions. She saved a failing prototype. She negotiated a vendor contract that cut costs by 40%. She was the only one who explained the data models in plain English. Quiet genius, now quietly defended. That night, in his study, Mr. Simmons retrieved a sealed envelope from a private Dunham legal archive. Something Charles Dunham, the late founder, had left behind before his passing. Inside was a single-page letter. Should the future of this company ever come into question, I urge the board to remember not only legacy, but loyalty. Elena Gray understood my vision better than most. She is a steward of what I built. Let her wisdom guide this company, even if her voice is not the loudest. It wasn't legally binding, but it was something. And for Simmons, who'd watched Charles build Dunham from a garage project into a global enterprise, it carried weight. A lot of it. The next morning, a private board meeting was convened. Margaret was not invited. She thought she had solidified her reign with that conference speech. She didn't know a storm was brewing behind closed doors. In that boardroom, Simmons placed everything on the table. The letter from Charles. The email warnings from Elena. Financial anomalies buried deep in the acquisition files. And finally, a single damning chart. Quarterly revenue spikes, each tied to projects Elena had led, and each at risk without her leadership. Silence fell. Then Simmons spoke. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "we may have just fired the wrong person." Jonathan Kim sat in his glass-walled office on the top floor of Dunham Tower, sipping lukewarm espresso. His screens displayed market tickers, emails, and a spreadsheet with updated financials. To the outside world, he was the unflappable CFO, the man who kept Dunham stable when markets wavered. But inside, something gnawed at him. He hadn't spoken to Elena since the firing, hadn't texted, hadn't asked if she was okay. He couldn't, because guilt didn't fit into the financial models he built for survival. But the silence screamed louder with every passing hour. Downstairs, the board's private audit team had begun pulling files. Old files, email threads, unsubmitted budget drafts. What they found painted a story Jonathan had hoped would stay buried. Misreported vendor costs, inflated projections used to push the failed acquisition, deferred losses shuffled into unrelated departments, all of it designed to cover the cracks, and all of it approved, or rather shielded, by Jonathan Kim, not because he was malicious, but because his numbers weren't adding up, and he needed time. Time Elena had tried to buy for him. Quietly, by warning Margaret. Time Margaret had wasted by refusing to listen. Now the board had the receipts. Margaret ignored all this. Asked board member Lane, eyebrows raised. Simmons nodded grimly. Elena warned her. Jonathan covered it. Margaret didn't question either of them. And instead of digging deeper, she crucified the one person who flagged the issue. She did. Silence. Then someone whispered what they were all thinking. If the media finds this out. Meanwhile, Margaret was celebrating. At least on the surface. She sat in the executive lounge, swirling a glass of Pinot Grigio, with two department heads who nodded at everything she said. Damage control handled, she said with smug satisfaction. The press already framed it as a decisive leadership move. One of the department heads cleared his throat. Still, Elena had supporters. Engineers are talking. Margaret waved it off. She's gone. She doesn't exist here anymore. Let them talk. But in that moment, she missed something. The tremor of doubt in the man's eyes. The way he checked his phone twice. The fact that he was scheduled to meet Simmons later that afternoon. Margaret believed she had won, but her victory had no foundation, and foundations crack. Quietly at first. In a private residence across town, Elena sat in sweats on a modest couch, watching the sunset paint streaks across her windows. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from a blocked number. I didn't know it would go that far. I'm sorry. Jay, she stared at it for a long time. No anger, no tears, just exhaustion. Jonathan had finally spoken, but it was too late. A decade of collaboration, all reduced to a single text message after public humiliation. She placed her phone face down. Then she opened her laptop and began reading. The folder she'd taken on the day she was fired, the one Margaret had dismissed, still sat unopened. Inside were contingency plans, alternative funding strategies, internal audits she'd quietly conducted, backups of her key contributions, each time-stamped, each saved to the cloud. She hadn't meant to use them this way. She never anticipated needing them as armor. But now they were proof, not for revenge, but for clarity, for truth. And something in her shifted. She wasn't going to disappear. She was going to rise. Back at Dunham Tower, Simmons called an emergency board meeting for the next morning. This time, Margaret was required to attend. Subject, financial clarification and leadership review. It was the kind of subject line that could freeze blood. Margaret read it and scoffed. They won't touch me, she muttered. But deep down, a flicker of doubt sparked. Because she'd seen that look in Simmons' eyes before. Not anger, worse, disappointment. At 9 a.m. sharp, the board assembled. Margaret entered in her tailored suit, heels clicking across the polished floor. She smiled thinly, assuming authority. Let's make this quick, she said. We have a press call at noon. Simmons didn't return the smile. Instead, he handed her a folder. Before we begin, please read this. She flipped through it. The audit, the falsified entries, the warning emails, with Elena's name on every single one. Then, Charles Dunham's letter. The room swam. This is incomplete, she said quickly. I didn't see all of this. You were sent it, Simmons replied. You ignored it. She was with Jonathan. She had motive. And Jonathan lied. We verified it last night. He's stepping down this afternoon. Silence. Then, you fired the wrong person, Margaret. Publicly. Cruelly. Margaret sat down, suddenly less tall. Someone handed her a glass of water. It trembled in her hand. Effective immediately, Simmons said softly. We're removing you as acting CEO. What? She gasped. You can't. You've lost the confidence of this board, our employees, and our founder's legacy. The damage you did to Elena, to the company's morale, cannot be overlooked. She looked around. No one backed her. Not a single nod. Only silence. The same kind she'd used to silence Elena in front of the world. And now, it echoed back at her like a curse. If this story is pulling your heartstrings and shaking your sense of justice, you're in the right place. Like, comment, and hit that subscribe button, because Elena's rise is just beginning, and trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. 3 days passed. 3 days of headlines, silence, and shifting power. Dunham Technologies released a cautious public statement. We have accepted the resignation of CFO Jonathan Kim due to internal discrepancies. Margaret Dunham will be stepping away from her executive duties. We thank them for their service and remain committed to transparency, accountability, and excellence. The press read between the lines. Whispers filled the tech world. Who was this Elena Gray, the so-called assistant who triggered a corporate upheaval? Why did a company worth billions bow to someone no one had seen on stage before? Was she a whistleblower, a genius, or a power player hiding in plain sight? While the media speculated, Elena stayed quiet. No interviews, no statements, just long walks in her neighborhood, hot tea, and reading. She wasn't plotting revenge. She was reclaiming peace. But the world wasn't done with her yet. On the fourth day, she received a hand-delivered envelope. Heavy paper. No return address. Inside, an invitation. Private session. Board of Directors. Dunham Technologies time, 9 a.m. Conference room 12B attire. Business formal purpose. Discussion of strategic future. No apology. No flattery. Just a call back into the arena she'd been dragged from. Elena held the card between her fingers for a while. Then she stood, went to her closet, and pulled out the black blazer she hadn't worn since the last executive retreat, the one Margaret canceled her from. She ironed it that night, not out of vanity, but as armor. The boardroom was smaller this time, less dramatic. Just 9 people, no media, no performance, just truth. Elena entered quietly, greeted with firm nods, not the kind of respect that makes noise, but the kind that doesn't evaporate when you turn your back. Simmons stood. Ms. Gray, thank you for coming. She sat down. Let's not waste time. I don't want a public rehab campaign. I'm not here to be used. Simmons nodded. That's fair. But you're also not here to be silenced anymore. They laid it out. Charles Dunham's letter, naming her as an unofficial steward of the company's future. Her equity vesting clause, embedded in the legacy documents, and only now revealed. Her project's performance, a staggering 62% increase in innovation metrics during her leadership. The collapse in morale after her firing, surveys showed a 40% dip in internal confidence, especially in R&D. Then came the offer. We'd like to create a new position, Simmons said. Chair of Strategic Ventures, a role not answerable to the CEO, but to the board. You'll oversee innovation pipelines, direct future partnerships, and hold a 1/3 stake in equity, per Charles's legacy clause. Silence. They were offering her power, real power, not just a corner office or a new title, but ownership, legacy, vindication. Elena leaned back. I thought you were done with me, she said softly. Simmons shook his head. Margaret was. We weren't. We were just too slow to stop her. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she asked one question. Why now? A long pause. Then Simmons replied, voice heavy with truth. Because you're the only one in this company who understood the mission without needing the spotlight. We need that now. Not showmanship, not survival, stewardship. Elena studied them. No groveling, no manipulation, just truth. And it was enough. I'll consider it, she said. And she meant it. Later that evening, she visited the Dunham rooftop, her old thinking spot. Windy, cold, peaceful. She stared at the skyline, remembering late nights in Margaret's office, dreams shared over spreadsheets, secrets held in silence, and betrayals wrapped in friendship. Jonathan had texted again that morning. I'm leaving town. If you ever want to talk, I still owe you that dinner. She didn't reply. Some chapters don't get rewritten. They get closed. She pulled her coat tighter, feeling the weight of everything shifting. Power, when held by the wrong hands, destroys. But in the right hands, it rebuilds. And Elena Gray was done hiding. The Dunham Tower conference room had been redesigned since Elena last saw it. Sleeker lighting, glass dividers, new digital boards. But some things hadn't changed. The stairs, the calculations behind people's smiles, the hierarchy of power cloaked in faux friendliness. This time, Elena didn't enter as an assistant. She entered as chair of Strategic Ventures, with voting rights, oversight over all future partnerships, and the founder's name legally tied to her role. She didn't need applause. but the silence that followed her entrance said everything. Respect doesn't have to clap. Sometimes it just listens. Most of the senior leadership was present, VPs of engineering, legal, marketing, plus department heads from innovation, international strategy, and HR. No Margaret. No Jonathan. They were gone. And yet, their ghosts lingered. A few whispered as Elena took her seat at the head of the long oval table. She noticed and ignored it. Simmons opened the meeting. Let's begin. As you know, Miss Gray will now oversee all strategic venture decisions, meaning product, development, partnerships, and forward-facing innovation flows through her chair. Someone cleared their throat. It was Darren Woods, VP of International Strategy. He'd once ignored her emails for 3 straight quarters. With all due respect, he began, some of us are unclear on the structure. She doesn't report to a CEO? No, Simmons answered. She reports to us. Directly. But isn't that irregular? So was publicly humiliating the company's top strategist based on nothing but personal suspicion, Simmons replied, without raising his voice. Silence again. Elena opened her folder. Let's talk about the 3 upcoming partnership proposals you've been sitting on since last quarter, she said, addressing Darren directly. Specifically, the one with the energy blockchain startup in Austin. He blinked. You already reviewed that? I reviewed it 6 weeks ago. While you were debating lunch with the Dutch delegation, a few suppressed smirks. Elena didn't gloat. She just flipped the next page and continued. By noon, she had dismantled 2 legacy proposals, greenlit 1 high-risk but high-potential pilot program, and introduced a metric system no one else had thought to propose. It wasn't loud. It wasn't flashy. It was surgical. By the end of the meeting, half the room realized something terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. Elena didn't want power. She was power. After the meeting, Marcy, the junior engineer who had first forwarded the internal emails to Simmons, caught up with Elena by the elevator. She was nervous, stammering. Ms. Gray, Chair Gray, I just wanted to say, I'm glad you're back. Elena smiled. Just Elena, I've been following your work since I was an intern. You once sat down with my team and explained the predictive load balancing system, even though you didn't have to, Elena remembered. Vaguely. It had been a 14-hour day. You're the reason I didn't quit, Marcy added. That stopped Elena. She looked at the young woman. Sharp, shy, brilliant. Just like she had been. Then I'm glad I stayed too, Elena said softly. Back in her new office, a space on the 35th floor with panoramic views and silence that no longer felt isolating, Elena unpacked only one photo, a picture of the original Dunham team years ago, including a much younger Charles, a barely graduated Margaret, and herself in the background holding a whiteboard marker. She pinned it to the wall, not as a trophy, but as a reminder of where she started, of what almost broke her, of what never should have been hers and now was. That night, she received a letter. Not an email, not a memo, a letter. Handwritten, folded in a cream envelope. From Margaret. I never meant to destroy you. I just didn't want to be forgotten. You were everything I wasn't. And it scared me. You deserved more than what I gave. I won't ask you to forgive me. But I will thank you for saving the company my father built, even after what I did to you. I'll be watching from a distance, but rooting for you. Margaret. Elena read it twice. Then she placed it in a drawer. Some endings don't need answers. They just need peace. Was that moment satisfying, or what? If you're rooting for Elena, for quiet genius, for redemption, for the right person finally being seen, hit that like button, share this video, and subscribe to stay with the journey. You know this story's got more to say. 3 weeks into her new role, Elena had already rewritten how Dunham Technologies approved innovation. Her framework was deceptively simple. If it doesn't solve a real-world problem, we don't fund it. If it doesn't uplift people, not just profit, we don't back it. If it doesn't carry ethical weight, we walk away. For some, this shift was refreshing. For others, it was threatening. But Elena didn't flinch. She was no longer protecting herself. She was protecting legacy. One cold Thursday morning, her executive assistant, newly promoted from the R&D team, buzzed in. "There's someone here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says you used to mentor him." Elena paused. "Name?" "Micah Reeves. He said you helped him launch his college thesis into a prototype 5 years ago." That name struck a chord. She remembered him. Lanky, awkward, a genius with wind turbines. She'd helped him apply for a grant through Dunham's Forgotten Young Innovators program, one that Margaret eventually defunded. "Send him in." Micah had grown into his confidence. Tall, sharper now, with an edge to his tone. "Elena," he said, as he stepped into her glass-walled office. "I didn't think you'd remember me." "I remember good ideas," she replied. "Sit." He didn't waste time. "I run a startup now, CoreCycle. We're rebuilding wind energy farms using recycled turbine materials. We figured out how to reduce power loss by 30% and construction waste by 70%. We just got pre-seed backing from Green Arc." Elena's eyebrow lifted. "Green Arc doesn't back early stage." "Exactly," he said. "But we've got something they don't. Execution. I learned that from you." He reached into his bag and pulled out a sleek proposal packet. "I'm here to offer Dunham first rights to co-develop our tech. No middlemen, no licensing, just a build-and-scale partnership. Equity split, shared R&D." Elena didn't touch the folder yet. Why not shop it to the usual suspects, Tesla Grid, or even government-backed labs? Micah looked her dead in the eye. "Because they'd use us to polish their image. You'd use us to change the world." She believed him. Not because of the pitch, but because of the fire. She'd had it once too. Still did. After Micah left, Elena read the packet. Twice. The numbers were solid. The tech was lean. The timeline was aggressive, maybe too aggressive. But the potential? Revolutionary. She called a meeting with her newly formed Strategic Innovation Committee, hand-picked engineers, sustainability advisors, and one behavioral economist, and presented the pitch. Most were cautiously intrigued. A few were skeptical. Only one, a soft-spoken design engineer named Chloe, asked the real question. "What's his motive?" Elena smiled. "To do what we never gave him a chance to do the first time." That evening she sat alone in her office as the city lights came on outside. This time, she wasn't reacting to betrayal. She wasn't recovering. She was deciding. Power didn't thrill her, but the use of it, the quiet, purposeful kind, that gave her meaning. She called Micah. "Let's schedule a pilot test. If the prototype holds, I'll walk it into board approval myself." He exhaled. "Thank you." "No," she said. "Thank you for reminding me why I fought to stay." The next week, Elena visited a retired Dunham test site in Colorado, a dusty, underfunded shell of its former glory. Engineers and windbreakers scurried to set up CoreCycle's modular turbine frames. Micah arrived late, covered in road dust. But when the prototype whirred to life, silent and fast, Elena saw what she needed to see. Not the machine. The team. They were the future. And she wasn't just gatekeeping it anymore. She was opening the gates. That night, while flying back to Chicago, Elena watched the clouds roll past her window. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was cleaning up someone else's mess. She felt like she was writing her own chapter. And just as she closed her tablet to rest, a notification pinged. Incoming email, subject, confidential inquiry, from the Guardian business desk. She opened it. "We are preparing a long-form feature on the leadership shakeup at Dunham, technologies and your role in the company's recent transformation. We'd appreciate an interview. Our sources say your story is more than redemption, it's revolution. Please confirm." Elena closed the email. She didn't need headlines. She needed results. Still, she knew. People were watching. And this time, they were watching her. If you feel that fire, the fire of starting over, of rebuilding stronger, of making silence louder than noise, then stay with Elena. Like, comment, and subscribe to Mr. Favortales. Because this is more than a story now. It's a movement. Elena's return had sparked a quiet renaissance inside Dunham. Morale surged. Ideas flowed. The press still buzzed with speculation, but internally, departments were producing at levels unseen in years. Her reforms were working. But success has a price, and sometimes It attracts enemies who smile when they shake your hand. 2 weeks after Core Cycle's successful pilot launch, Elena received a calendar ping from the board secretary. Subject, Special Session, Proposal Review requested by Ian Renner, Board. Member topic, Strategic Acquisition Opportunity, Virex Capital. Virex. That name sent a ripple down her spine. Virex Capital was a private equity firm with a reputation for buying undervalued innovation labs, stripping their IP, and reselling to the highest bidder, often international buyers with no ethical alignment. They were predators in suits. She remembered turning down their approaches twice when Margaret was CEO. Now they were back, and someone had invited them in. At the board session, Ian Renner, a silver-haired financier with a charming voice and a wolfish smile, presented his case. Virex is interested in acquiring a 15% stake in Dunham's R&D wing, he said casually, like he was suggesting an extra side of salad. In exchange, they'd inject $300 million in unrestricted funding, open 6 global distribution channels, and fast-track international patents. Several board members nodded, impressed. Elena watched, stone-faced. Then she spoke. What's their exit strategy? Ian blinked. Pardon? Virex never plays long-term. They buy in, inflate valuation, then exit with double returns within 3 years. What happens when they pull out and our pipeline is tied to their legal framework? That's speculation, Ian said. That's their history, Elena snapped. The room tensed. Simmons sat forward. Ian, did you run this by Chair Gray before inviting them into review? No, Ian admitted. But as a board member, I have the right to propose strategic partnerships. You do, Simmons agreed. But proposing a partnership with a known strip-and-sell firm without consulting, the person responsible for strategic ventures is reckless at best. Elena didn't speak again. She didn't need to. The vote was postponed. But the message was clear. Someone wanted her sidelined, and they weren't going to wait for her to fail. They were planning it. Later that day, Elena returned to her office to find a small white envelope on her desk. No name, no logo. Inside, a single printed sentence. They will smile in front of you and sign your company away behind your back. No sender, no signature. She stared at it for a long time. Was it a threat? A warning? A mind game? She placed it in her top drawer. She didn't know who sent it, but she already knew the truth in it. That evening, she sat in a dim-lit wine bar downtown with Simmons, their first off-site meeting since her reinstatement. Ian's been pushing for outside money since the first whisper of Margaret's exit, Simmons admitted. He's old school. He sees your reforms as a risk. Then why keep him? Because he has voting power and capital connections. We can't oust him, yet. Elena took a sip of her red wine. Then we neutralize him. Simmons arched a brow. You're thinking like a CEO. No, she said. I'm thinking like a survivor who's done playing nice. The next morning, Elena called Marcy, Chloe, and 2 department heads into her war room. She pulled up Ian's investment history. Together, they found 3 past deals where his affiliates had been investigated for misrepresenting tech assets. Nothing criminal, but plenty unethical. We create a white paper, Elena said, not as an attack, just a comparative analysis. What happens when ethical innovation is absorbed by short-term capital? Chloe smiled. Call it the cost of compromise. Marcy grinned. You sure you don't want the CEO title? Elena shook her head. No, I want something bigger. I want Dunham to stop playing defense. By the end of the week, Elena released the white paper on Dunham's internal portal. Employees read it. Managers circulated it. Partners referenced it. And someone, no one admitted who, leaked it to the press. The headline the next day read, Dunham's quiet genius fires back at predatory capital. Virex withdrew their offer within 48 hours. Ian Renner resigned from the board 5 days later. Officially, it was for personal reasons. Unofficially, he'd lost, and Elena had won, again. But victory didn't bring relief, because Elena knew something no one else did. The letter on her desk wasn't about Ian. It was a signal. Someone was watching. Someone knew there were bigger storms ahead, and the only way to survive them was to build faster than they could strike. If you feel the pressure, the corporate politics, the quiet power, the warning. Signs in plain sight. Drop a like, comment your thoughts, and subscribe. Elena's enemies aren't done yet, and neither is she. The white paper had made waves. Virex had retreated. Ian was gone. Elena's leadership was no longer whispered about. It was spoken aloud, with both admiration and caution. But beneath the victory, a new feeling stirred, unease. Because when a power vacuum forms, something always rushes in to fill it. And Elena knew better than most. Silence could be a strategy. One Monday morning, Marcy burst into Elena's office, visibly shaken. "Someone tried to breach our internal project files," she said, holding a digital forensics report. "They were targeting core cycle blueprints, specifically the version we haven't announced yet." Elena's stomach turned. Internal or external? Hard to say. Whoever it was, they used an internal clearance level. But from a retired account, Elena frowned. Whose? Someone who left during the Margaret era. But their credentials were never revoked. System oversight. Classic Dunham sloppiness from the past, now turned into a weapon. Elena stood. "Get Chloe. We're starting something new, off books, quiet, clean." She called it the 12. 12 employees, personally selected from different departments. Loyal, sharp, unshakable. They weren't official. Their names weren't on any charter. But their purpose was clear. Trace the leaks. Audit, internal access. Map who benefits when Dunham stumbles. Not spies, sentinels. They met at odd hours, under fake calendar labels like vendor protocol review or tech stack alignment. They didn't talk in Slack. They used encrypted peer-to-peer apps, scrubbed every 2 days. It wasn't paranoia. It was insurance. Because Elena knew how betrayal looked. She had seen it in Margaret's eyes. And now she was building a fortress before the next strike. A week into the investigation, the 12 found something odd. A consulting firm named Armax Strategies had begun making inquiries, quietly, softly, asking vendors about Dunham's production capacity and internal timelines. Elena recognized the name. Armax was a shell. She'd seen it before, used by aggressive investors to simulate interest, destabilize a company's value, and prepare for hostile bids. This wasn't curiosity, this was reconnaissance, and it meant someone was preparing for a move. But who? Elena narrowed it down to 3 possibilities. 1. A rival firm, hoping to devalue Dunham through manufactured leaks or rumors. 2. A discontented ex-board member, someone like Ian, who might still have old grudges and quiet allies. 3. An inside sympathizer, someone still loyal to Margaret or simply threatened by Elena's reforms. Whatever the source, they weren't playing fair. So Elena stopped playing by old rules. She summoned Simmons and 2 board allies to a private dinner in a discreet downtown club. No press, no aides. "I want to build an internal security council," she said. Technical, legal, financial, quiet oversight on every executive clearance and external engagement. Simmons raised a brow. "You think someone's trying to—" "I know someone's probing our weaknesses," Elena said. "I won't let Dunham fall because of shadows again." The board members exchanged glances. Then Simmons nodded. "You have our backing." The next morning, Chloe and Marcy presented a breakthrough. The credential used in the breach attempt had been cross-linked, unknowingly, to a cloud server still linked to an old executive's consulting contract. The name? Dominic Reese, former VP of Global Strategy. He left 2 years ago, after Margaret's restructure, and had since worked quietly as an advisor to unnamed investment firms. He had motive. He had access. And now, they had a name. Elena didn't call him. She didn't file charges. She didn't leak anything to the press. She simply sent him a message. Through legal. "We're aware of your digital fingerprints on our systems. Consider this your only courtesy warning. The next contact will be from our legal counsel, and it will be public. Walk away. Permanently." Within 24 hours, Dominic deleted his online bios, closed his business, email, and filed formal separation from any Dunham-affiliated vendors. He got the message, and Elena had sent it without ever raising her voice. Back in her office, Elena sat in the dark, city lights twinkling through her windows. She should have felt relief, but instead, she felt resolve, because for every Dominic, There were 2 more in waiting, and the only way to keep Dunham safe wasn't to eliminate threats. It was to outlast them, by staying smarter, staying quieter, and never underestimating how fast the game could change. If this twist got your heart racing, if you felt that shift when Elena built the 12 and sent the quiet warning, you're right where you need to be. Like this video, drop a comment about your favorite moment so far, and subscribe to join the journey, because we're only halfway through the game. It started with a knock, not a meeting request, not an email, not a buzz from her assistant, just a knock. Elena looked up from her desk. "Come in." The door opened slowly, and there he stood. Jonathan Kim, hair shorter, suit sharper, smile absent. She hadn't seen him in person since the day Margaret fired her, since the silence, the text, the shame. "Jonathan," she said, keeping her voice neutral, "did you lose your calendar privileges?" He smirked faintly. "You always were the sharper one." She didn't return it. "You've got 5 minutes." He sat down cautiously. "Elena, I know I'm the last person you want to see. Maybe the last you should trust. No argument here." He looked down, then back at her. "I didn't come to explain the past. I came with something that could help your future." Her silence told him to continue. "I've been consulting with a clean capital fund, Northwell Partners. They're looking to back a new fund strictly for ethical tech expansion. Quiet money, long play. They want Dunham." Elena folded her arms. "Why not just call the front desk like everyone else?" "Because they're not offering the fund to just anyone. They want a joint build, with you, not Dunham, you." That froze her. "I told them I could set up the conversation," he added. "No strings, no favors, just a door, if you want it." Elena stared at him. Was it guilt? Redemption? Or was this another setup? Jonathan reached into his inner pocket and placed a slim folder on her desk. "I'll leave this here," he said. "Read it, or don't. But I meant what I said in that text, Elena. You deserved better, from all of us." He stood and paused at the door. "You made it," he said quietly. "You really made it." Then he left. She didn't open the folder right away. She stared at it all afternoon, like it was ticking. Finally, after sunset, she opened it. The numbers were clean. The structure, ambitious. Northwell's proposal was essentially an R&D acceleration partnership, one that positioned Elena, not Dunham, as the authority. They wanted to co-found a think tank, with Elena's ethics model at its core. They didn't want to absorb her. They wanted to platform her. It was the first offer that didn't try to steal her name. It wanted to share it. The next day, Simmons called her into a quiet meeting. He knew about Jonathan's visit. "You thinking of leaving?" he asked directly. "No," Elena said. "But I'm thinking of expanding." "Would it be Dunham-backed?" "I haven't decided." He looked at her long and hard, then nodded. "You've earned the right to choose." She didn't expect that. She'd expected pushback, suspicion, but not respect. And that made her think harder. She called Chloe and Marcy into her office. "I'm considering building something beside Dunham, not to compete, to complement, but it can't be run the old way." Chloe raised an eyebrow. "What's the model?" "A private lab, open access for underfunded innovators, funded by ethical capital. No corporate red tape, no performance theater." Marcy blinked. "That sounds impossible." "So did surviving Margaret," Elena said with a smirk. "We'll start small, then more seriously. Only if we do it together." Chloe and Marcy didn't hesitate. "I'm in," Chloe said. "Me too," said Marcy. "As long as we name one of the labs after that white paper." They laughed. And just like that, something new was born. But not everyone was pleased. 2 days later, Elena received a terse email from a senior VP in Dunham's legal team. Any future venture must undergo review by internal ethics and competitive engagement committees. Your recent meetings raise questions about possible conflict. Elena forwarded the email to Simmons. His reply was simple. Ignore it. That memo's being rescinded. We're not in the business of punishing vision anymore. That night, Elena stared out at the skyline from her rooftop. She thought about the folder, the knock on her door, the past she couldn't erase. Jonathan had reappeared not as a threat, but as a mirror, A reminder of who she once trusted, who she'd once almost loved. And maybe, despite the scars, who still saw the brilliance in her that even she forgot was there. She didn't forgive him. Not yet, but she didn't hate him anymore either. And that, she realized, was freedom. Did you feel that twist? That quiet reappearance of someone who broke her, but didn't break her? Hit that like if you're feeling this next evolution. Drop your thoughts in the comments and subscribe, because Elena's story is now moving beyond revenge, into empire. It was Marcy who said it first. You know the press is calling it the Gray Lab, right? Elena looked up from her whiteboard, where equations and flowcharts sprawled across every inch. She blinked. What? The think tank, the new R&D hub we're building. That's what people are calling it. TechCrunch, Bloomberg, even some Reddit threads. Chloe leaned against the glass panel. It's not official, but the name's catching on. Elena frowned. It's not about me. Marcy shrugged. Tell that to the people who keep calling. They were in a temporary space, a former Dunham satellite building, now leased for Elena's personal project under a private trust she created with Simmons's help. No press releases, no shiny launch events, just code, wireframes, mechanical parts, and brains. Brilliant, underfunded, overlooked minds, young engineers, immigrant, coders, single mothers with PhDs, war veterans turned data analysts. People who had once been invisible, now seen, now working, and slowly building something real. They named the initiative Horizon Core, Chloe's idea, because legacy shouldn't be something you inherit. It should be something you build forward. The funding came in quietly. Northwell Partners approved the first $5 million round, with zero interference. Elena structured everything around three principles. 1. Build what matters, not what sells. 2. Open door, zero politics. 3. Everyone owns a piece. No ivory towers. No corporate ladders. Just minds, machines, and mission. A month into the build, Elena received a package. Hand-delivered, no return address. Inside, a leather-bound notebook. She opened it and found dozens of pages of handwritten ideas, algorithms, formulas, process maps. All annotated, all hers. From her earliest days at Dunham. On the last page, in block print, you never needed a title. You were always the company, no signature. But she knew whose handwriting it was. Margaret. Elena closed the notebook gently. She should have felt bitterness. She didn't. Not anymore, because Margaret had finally admitted the truth, not to the world, but to her. And sometimes, private acknowledgments matter more than public apologies. She placed the notebook on her shelf, right beside Charles Dunham's letter. But not everything was peaceful, because quietly, subtly, cracks were forming. A week later, Elena noticed that one of the Horizon engineers, a recent hire named Priya, had missed 2 meetings and submitted incomplete documentation on a sensitive project. When questioned, she was evasive. I've been overwhelmed, she said. Just tired. But Elena had learned how to read dodges. She asked Chloe to review internal data access logs. What they found sent a chill through the room. Priya had downloaded a full backup of Horizon's prototype blueprints and transferred it to a personal external drive. Encrypted, hidden, but caught. When confronted, she broke. I didn't mean to hurt anything, she said, eyes red. I needed money. Someone approached me weeks ago, offered a year's salary just to send the files, said it wasn't theft, just research duplication. I didn't know how deep it was until… Elena didn't yell. She didn't shame her. She simply asked, who? Priya hesitated, then answered, Armax, the same firm that had circled Dunham months earlier. They weren't gone. They had just shifted targets. Now they wanted her lab, her people, her future. Elena didn't press charges. She let Priya go quietly, with severance and a signed agreement barring her from future IP claims. Some on the team were outraged. She should be banned from the entire sector, one engineer said. No second chances, another snapped. But Elena disagreed. She's not the enemy, she said. She's the warning. And she meant it. That night, she called Simmons. Armax is circling again, she said. We'll run point, he promised. I'll get our legal team to preemptively protect anything tied to Horizon. But Elena had already begun writing something bigger, a policy framework that would redefine how innovation spaces handled internal betrayal. A sort of founder's clause, but ethical, one that wouldn't rely on vengeance or exile, but on protection, process, and redemption. She called it the integrity loop, because you don't protect vision by locking doors, you protect it by strengthening trust. If you're riding with Elena through this storm, if you felt that moment of betrayal, sting, but saw the grace she chose instead, this story's speaking to you. Hit that like, comment your thoughts, and subscribe, because this isn't just about power anymore. It's about how you wield it. The invitation came in glossy packaging, accompanied by a high-profile speaker badge. Global Innovation Forum, Keynote Roundtable, the Future of Ethical Tech Leadership. Elena scanned the list. The other panelists? CEOs, founders, venture titans. She was the only one listed as chair of strategic ventures, founder, Horizon Core, no CEO, no initials behind her name. But her photo was front and center, the quiet genius, now impossible to ignore. She hadn't planned to attend, but Chloe insisted. They want your voice, she said. And let's be honest, they need to see what real leadership looks like, especially after the Priya incident. Not everyone sees it that way, Elena replied. Then show them. The conference was held at a luxury tech resort in Northern California. Bright white halls, frosted glass panels, coffee bars, and camera crews. Elena wore a simple gray suit, no jewelry, no flashy heels. She didn't need them. She walked with calm fire. The whispers started immediately. That's her. The Dunham girl who took over quietly. Isn't she the one who got fired and came back? Heard she turned down 2 VC offers already. She ignored them all. She didn't need validation from people still learning how to read blueprints she'd authored years ago. The panel began under a giant curved screen, with hundreds of attendees and thousands more streaming online. 4 seats on stage. Elena, Victor Alston, CEO of Technova, Riley Strauss, founding partner of Plexigrid, and Dr. Renee Campos, a renowned AI ethicist. The moderator smiled too brightly. We begin with a question for Miss Gray, she said. You've become something of a mystery icon in the tech world, leading behind the curtain. But some say Horizon Core is still too new to justify the attention it's receiving. What makes your model more than just noise? There it was, the coded doubt. The challenge wrapped in civility. Elena didn't flinch. She waited 2 beats before answering. Noise doesn't reduce energy waste by 40% in a prototype field test, she said evenly. A few chuckles in the crowd. She continued. Noise doesn't retain 97% of its engineers during a global tech layoff wave. Noise doesn't mentor veterans and single mothers into patent holders. Noise doesn't build because noise doesn't listen. Pause. And for the record, I didn't ask for attention. I asked for access. We built the rest. Now the crowd clapped. Even Victor leaned back with a nod. Game recognized game, but the next question came sharper. This time from an audience member, a well-known investor with a long track record in the private equity circuit. Ms. Gray, your framework sounds noble, but isn't it naive to believe innovation can scale without pressure, without performance-driven benchmarks? Aren't you building an idealistic model that might collapse the minute real competition arrives? Elena smiled faintly. It wasn't the first time she'd heard this. She stood, the only panelist to do so. I was fired in front of shareholders because someone needed a scapegoat, she said, calm but firm. They said I was too quiet, too cautious, too loyal. Months later, I was called back. Not to apologize, but to rebuild what collapsed without me. A hush fell over the crowd. If performance is your only measure, she added, then understand this. Horizon Core doesn't perform for applause. We perform for results, and we build with people who've been overlooked for too long because they know what it means to survive. That's a better competitive advantage than any capital injection. Applause exploded. Someone stood, then another. Elena didn't raise her voice once. She didn't need to. Truth, when rooted in action, doesn't shout. It simply lands. After the panel, press reporters swarmed her. Questions, microphones, bright lights. She only took 2. One was from a local high school journalist, trembling with nerves. "What do you say to girls who want to be you someday?" Elena bent slightly, looking her in the eye. "Don't be me," she said. "Be you. Be better. Be louder if you want. Or be quiet. But let your results speak so loud they can't forget your name, even when they try." The girl teared up, and Elena walked away before the cameras could catch hers. That night, she sat alone in her hotel suite. Not with wine, not with headlines, just stillness. She didn't need to celebrate. She just needed to breathe. For years, she'd fought to be heard. Today, she hadn't asked for the mic, and they gave it to her anyway. If you felt Elena's words deep in your chest, if her truth echoed something in your own life, this is your story too. Like, comment, and subscribe, because her next move will define everything. 1 week after the Global Innovation Forum, Elena returned to Dunham headquarters for a quarterly internal alignment. Though her time was now split between Dunham and Horizon Core, her presence at the company she'd once nearly lost was still powerful. She didn't walk in like a guest. She walked in like she never left. And in many ways, she hadn't. The meeting was meant to be routine. Progress on sustainability partnerships. Expansion into low-cost battery storage. Employee equity restructuring. But just as Simmons introduced Elena to present on Dunham's future innovation roadmap, something unexpected happened. A voice from the back of the boardroom interrupted. "I think we need to address the conflict of interest first." Heads turned. It was Carter Lang, the new head of legal and risk, appointed just 3 months ago under the radar while Elena had been occupied with Horizon. He stood with calm, legalistic venom. "Before we proceed with strategy discussions," Carter continued, "I believe the board should review the ethical implications of having a major shareholder simultaneously funding a competing innovation lab." Murmurs rippled across the room. Elena didn't react. Simmons' expression tightened. "Carter, no disrespect," Carter interjected, "but Horizon Core's increasing visibility, proprietary advances, and funding channels put it in potential breach of the Dunham Employee Equity Charter, especially since Ms. Gray holds executive privileges in both organizations." Elena finally spoke. "Are you accusing me of theft?" "No," Carter replied smoothly. "I'm raising legal questions before someone else does, publicly." There it was, the veiled threat, and the beginning of what could become a scandal, if unchecked. After the meeting, Simmons pulled her aside. "Where did that come from?" she asked. "Lang's loyal to a faction on the board, the old guard investors who stayed quiet after Margaret left. They see Horizon as a threat. I made my roles transparent from day one." "Yes, but they're playing a different game now." That night, back at Horizon's private office, Elena called an emergency meeting with Chloe and Marcy. "This is a play," she said. "They're trying to corner me legally, not because they believe I've done something wrong, but because they want to restrict what I can do next." Chloe nodded. "The next innovation cycle report is due next month. They're trying to cut off your runway before your results hit." Marcy leaned forward. "We can release early." Elena shook her head. "No, we don't react. We lead." Then her eyes sharpened. "And if they want to accuse me of building something powerful, then let's become too powerful to break." The next morning, Elena submitted a letter to the board. Not defensive, not panicked, transparent, measured, and devastatingly strategic. She outlined her personal equity share in Horizon Core, independently held, separate from Dunham. Her dual commitments, previously reviewed and approved by legal under Simmons, and her intention to open Horizon Core's collaboration model to Dunham engineers, creating a bridge, not a wall. She ended with this: "You can't fight legacy with paperwork, you fight it with purpose. Horizon Core doesn't compete with Dunham. It completes what Dunham forgot how to protect." Within hours, her letter was leaked. No one ever claimed responsibility, but it was shared on LinkedIn, then tech forums, then mid-tier publications. By the end of the day, legacy with purpose was trending. Tech employees across the country, especially women, BIPOC engineers, and independent inventors, reposted her letter with comments like, "She said it without flinching." Finally, someone draws a line between ownership and exploitation. Carter Lang called a meeting to discuss reputational risk. It was cancelled within 24 hours. The board shut it down. And Simmons made it clear, Elena is not under investigation. She's under recognition. Carter resigned a week later. Not publicly, not loudly, but completely. Elena didn't celebrate. She didn't gloat. She walked into Dunham 2 days later, presented her roadmap, and left to visit a high school where Horizon had just launched its first youth fellowship. There, a 12-year-old girl handed her a crayon drawing of a lab labeled Ms. Gray's Brain House. Elena smiled. That was the name that mattered. Not the ones in the boardroom. Not the ones in lawsuits. Just that one, scribbled in purple marker by a girl who believed brains still changed the world. If Elena's strength moved you, if her restraint, her strategy, her refusal to be dragged into the mud inspired you, hit like, comment, and subscribe. Because legacy doesn't always come from winning battles. Sometimes, it comes from building anyway. Elena received the call at 6:47 a.m. She was in her kitchen, barefoot, pouring coffee into a ceramic mug that read, Quiet Genius. Ms. Gray, the voice on the other end said, This is Lenore Briggs, Estate Legal Counsel for the Dunham Trust. Elena's hand paused mid-pour. I wasn't aware I had business with the trust. You didn't, Lenore replied. But you do now. The meeting was set for noon at a private law office in Oak Park. When Elena arrived, she was greeted with a firm handshake and a thick manila folder. Before he died, Lenore said, Charles Dunham recorded 3 codicils to his will. 2 were executed years ago. 1 was sealed. Until now. Elena sat still. Why now? Because you reached a milestone, Lenore said. Your equity threshold in Dunham Technologies just crossed 15%. That triggered the final clause. 15%? Elena repeated. That can't be right. I don't have that much. You do, Lenore said. Between your legacy shares, performance stock from the last 2 quarters, and recently, transferred founder's equity from Margaret's trust, it all crossed the threshold. Elena blinked. Margaret's trust? She echoed. Lenore nodded slowly. Before she stepped away, Margaret signed over a portion of her father's holdings, specifically, designated to be transferred to the one who best stewards the company in my absence. She named you silence. Real silence. Not confusion. Not shock. Something deeper. Something that felt like both burden and reward. Lenore continued. This final clause gives you access to the Dunham founding blueprints, a restricted archive of Charles's original business journals, tech patents, and prototype schematics. Things never released to the public. Why me? Elena asked softly. Because, Lenore said, opening the file, Charles named you. On the front page of the sealed codicil was Charles Dunham's handwriting. The future isn't just built by blood. It's built by brilliance. If I'm gone, and she's still here, give her the blueprints. She'll know what to do. Elena closed her eyes. Not to cry, but to steady the fire that rose quietly in her chest. That afternoon, she sat in a quiet archive room with gloves and a fresh notepad. Inside the archive box were journals dating back to 1985, schematics for early renewable turbine tech, predictive automation, code, and sketches of a project Charles had called Project Atlas. It was a system he had dreamed of, one that could synchronize power flow across entire regions using decentralized nodes. Too advanced for its time. But not now. Elena scanned the pages. If she and the Horizon team could modernize this, they could revolutionize clean tech globally. And now, she had the right, the legacy, the proof. She called Chloe and Marcy into the office that night. They sat around a conference table, stunned, flipping through copied pages of Charles's plans. I thought all of this was just rumor, Chloe whispered. He believed in it, Elena said. But the board never backed him, said it was too expensive, too radical. Marcy tapped a page. This could change everything. Elena nodded. And it will. But outside her office, the world had already caught scent. Word had leaked that Elena now held a controlling innovation share. Tech media spun theories. Analysts debated motives. Some whispered that she was building a rival empire. Others said she was simply doing what Margaret couldn't, transforming Dunham's legacy without burning it down. And somewhere in the noise came another letter, This one handwritten. From Margaret. I gave you my shares because my father was right. You were always meant to hold the blueprints. I fought you out of fear. But I give you this, not as surrender, as recognition. What you build next. Do it for all of us. Elena folded the letter. No tears. No triumph. Just purpose. And that, she knew, was the strongest blueprint of all. If your heart beat a little faster reading that letter, if you felt the weight of Charles's words and the strength of Margaret's final gesture, like, comment, and subscribe. Because now, Elena isn't just building a future. She's rewriting a history. It began with a glitch. Marcy noticed it first, a lag in the Horizon server's sandbox environment. Just a 3-second delay while running a simulation of the Project Atlas synchronization model. Then the next day, Chloe found a file mismatch, a line of code that had been rewritten, subtly, not by her, not by Elena, and not by anyone on their direct team. At first, they assumed error, then sabotage, then something worse. They activated their internal digital forensics software, something Elena had built months ago after the first wave of data breach attempts. It took 2 hours to trace the trail, not to an outsider, not to a contractor, but to a login from a Dunham Technologies server node. Someone inside the mother company, Elena's first home, was watching Project Atlas unfold. Not just watching, copying, downloading, waiting. Could be a clone attempt, Chloe said. They might be trying to reverse engineer before we go public. Marcy's voice was tight. Or they're setting up to claim it first. Elena stared at the screen. The access logs didn't show a name, only a mirrored IP bounce that looped through 6 internal proxies. But the signature line was unique. A data tag left accidentally during one of the autosave script runs. Elena zoomed in, then froze. It was tagged Clang X3.4 Carter Lang, the former head of legal who had resigned, or so everyone thought. Simmons confirmed it hours later. He's consulting privately now, technically unaffiliated. But he still has friends here, people who owe him. Elena's jaw tightened. He never left. He just changed floors. And judging by this, Simmons said, handing her a printed investor report, he's advising a new firm, an innovation holding group, called Elevair Systems. Elena blinked. I've never heard of them. Neither had I, until they started recruiting Dunham engineers. Quietly, strategically. Especially ones who had clearance to our old legacy tech archives. Chloe stood, voice sharp. They're trying to beat us to launch. Project Atlas had been Charles's dream. Now it was Elena's mission, and someone was trying to steal it, not for vision, for valuation. Elena held an emergency task force meeting that night. Only 6 people, no emails, no digital invites, phones left at the door. She laid it out. Carter's digital fingerprints. Elevair's silent hiring spree. The Dunham IP nodes that still hadn't been shut down. Then she circled the whiteboard 3 times. This isn't about control anymore, she said. It's about proof and timing. We fast-track Atlas, Chloe said. Yes, Elena replied. But quietly, they codenamed it Helios. A disguise, a cloaked project shell within the Horizon ecosystem. Inaccessible to external review, visible only to those with biometric key access. No VPNs, no cloud-based simulators, no Slack threads. Only in-person work, only traceable by hand, old school. Because sometimes, to protect the future, you have to build like it's the past. Meanwhile, Simmons took action on his end. He called an off-record meeting with Dunham's legacy board members. I don't care if they're scared of Elena's power, he told them. If Elevair launches Charles's blueprint under their name, this company's reputation, and its moral center, will disintegrate. Some argued it wasn't their fight. Some still held silent grudges over Elena's rise. But Simmons, for once, didn't negotiate. He warned them, if we don't back her now, we're not just losing our future, we're betraying our founder's final vision. That settled it. The board authorized Simmons to discreetly resecure every archive node tied to Charles Dunham's innovation vaults. But it might already be too late. 3 days later, a press release went live. Elevair Systems to unveil a global energy synchronization prototype, Project Pulse, at next month's World Tech Showcase. Elena read it in silence. Same timeline. Same specs. Same core idea. Except the name. Except the soul. She didn't panic. She didn't rant. She printed the press release, taped it to the Horizon war room wall, then wrote under it with a red marker, "Let them go first. We'll go right." And underneath that, Charles didn't want a product. He wanted a revolution. Are you holding your breath yet? If you're watching Elena face this theft with precision instead of panic, you know this woman is built different. Like, comment, and subscribe, because the real showdown is coming. 2 weeks before Elevair's highly publicized launch of Project Pulse, Elena made her move. No press, no countdown, no leaks, just one email, quietly sent to 87 of the most influential stakeholders in tech, finance, and policy. You are invited to a private demonstration of Horizon Core's synchronized renewable energy node network. Codename, Helios. Location, Dunham Technologies Legacy Auditorium. Date, redacted. This is not a product pitch. This is a promise kept. She signed it with 3 words. For Charles. For tomorrow. Simmons called her that night. You're sure this is the move? Yes, she replied. We don't need headlines. We need witnesses. What if Elevair sues? They can't sue for what they didn't build. And she meant it. Because every line of Helios, every node, every timing algorithm, every redundancy, failover, had been rebuilt from scratch based on Charles Dunham's original sketches. Not copied, resurrected, and now it was ready. The demo was held on a quiet Thursday. No cameras, just eyes. The room held investors, energy regulators, university engineers, and former Dunham employees who had once believed Charles's ideas were science fiction. Now they watched as Elena's team activated 5 interconnected energy nodes spread across 4 states, simulating a clean energy grid balancing itself in real time. Chloe walked them through the process. Marcy showed the technical audit trail. And Elena? She stood back, letting her people speak. Because that was leadership. When the system self-corrected a simulated surge in less than 1.4 seconds, the room erupted, not in noise, but in stunned silence. People stood. Some blinked. Others looked at Elena as though they'd just seen the future walk in wearing gray slacks and calm fire. A Nobel laureate approached her afterward. Your father must be proud, he said, mistaking Charles as her actual parent. Elena smiled politely. He wasn't my father, she said. He might as well have been. The next day, without any announcement, Dunham Technologies quietly updated its global website. A new header appeared. In partnership with Horizon Core, Project Helios, the future, synchronized. No lawsuits followed. Because Elevair hadn't even launched yet. And when they did, 3 days later, they were met with cold shoulders, PR silence, and a quiet memo from regulators asking whether their prototype was original. Their event drew 200. Elena's demo had drawn 87 who mattered. But just as the dust began to settle, another message arrived. This one on a plain card. Typed, not emailed. Congratulations. Now look behind you. No signature, no context, just a threat. Or a warning. She turned to her team. We secure everything. Again. Assume there's another game already in motion. And she was right. Later that evening, Chloe received an anonymous message on her encrypted Horizon line. It contained a list of employee names. 5 of them. 3 were former Dunham engineers. 2 were current Horizon Core fellows. Marked pending offers, Elevair Systems. They were being poached. But not for money. For access. Elena stared at the list. One name made her pause. A fellow she had personally recruited. A veteran with a child. She hadn't suspected disloyalty. And maybe that was the point. Sabotage doesn't always wear a villain's face. Sometimes, it wears need. She called him in the next morning. She didn't accuse him. She asked him one question. Why? He hesitated. Then, my daughter's medical bills. They offered twice my pay, and promised they'd cover her next surgery if I gave them the prototype schematic. Elena exhaled, not in anger, in understanding. Then she handed him a folder. Inside, a revised Horizon contract. with double the pay, and a medical clause for immediate family. He looked up, stunned. "Why?" he asked. She didn't answer right away. Then, "Because we don't fix systems by punishing the desperate. We fix them by refusing to let need be weaponized," he cried. And she walked away. If that moment hit you, if Elena's strength, her mercy, her strategy moved something in you, like, comment, and subscribe. This is no longer a story. It's a declaration. Quiet power can change everything. The morning after the Helios demonstration and the failed Elevair launch, Elena stood before the same mirror where she'd once rehearsed her resignation speech. This time, she wasn't hiding. This time, she was asking herself a question: what do I do with all this power? For months, she had led two fronts, rebuilding Dunham's fractured legacy and nurturing Horizon Core into something ethical and revolutionary. Now, for the first time, the question wasn't about survival. It was about purpose. She looked into the mirror, her reflection steady, calm. Behind her stood a shelf lined with three things: Charles Dunham's blueprints, Margaret's final letter, a crayon drawing labeled Ms. Gray's Brain House. None of them had asked her to conquer, they had asked her to choose. That morning, Simmons requested a private walk through Dunham's original campus, the industrial-style building where the company had first launched in 1981. Elena accepted. The halls smelled of old metal and innovation. They passed framed photos of Charles shaking hands with early partners, blueprints for solar hubs, and faded mission statements in cursive. "I wanted to show you this," Simmons said, stopping at a sealed office. He opened it with an old-fashioned key. Inside, everything had been preserved. Charles's desk, a typewriter, shelves lined with handwritten ledgers, a single framed photo of Elena, Margaret, and Charles from an off-site retreat nearly a decade ago, all laughing. Elena had forgotten that moment existed. She stepped inside, overwhelmed by a silence that wasn't empty. It was full. "Charles talked about you constantly," Simmons said. "He used to call you the one who can see beyond the room." "I never understood what he meant." "I do," Elena whispered. "It meant you never needed the power to lead. You just needed the chance." Simmons handed her a slim folder. "This is my last official act as chairman." Elena froze. "You're stepping down?" He nodded. "It's time. I've held this company together with duct tape and diplomacy, but it needs something more now. Who takes your place?" Simmons met her eyes. "You." She almost laughed. "I'm not a chairman. No. You're a builder. That's what this place needs. I already run Horizon." "Then make Horizon the brain," Simmons said. "And let Dunham be the heart. Lead both. Not as a tyrant, not as a queen. As the blueprint." That night, Elena didn't sleep. She sat on her balcony, a cup of tea in her hand, phone beside her. A dozen congratulatory texts had rolled in from quiet allies across industries. People she'd helped. People she'd hired. People she'd saved. But one message made her pause. "You said no before, but if you lead both, maybe we build together again. From scratch, from trust." Jonathan, she didn't reply, but she smiled. Not because she needed him, because she no longer needed to prove anything to him, or anyone. The next morning, she signed the acceptance letter. Chairwoman of the Dunham Strategic Trust, founder of Horizon Core, and steward of Project Helios. No crown, no fanfare, just another day of work, and the quiet power of a woman who had been underestimated for too long. Later that week, she stood before a small crowd of interns at Horizon. They'd gathered for the lab's first official fellowship kickoff. A young woman in the front row asked, "How do you know when it's your time?" Elena smiled. "You don't," she said. "You just stop waiting for someone else to say it." If you felt that echo, that moment when Elena looked in the mirror and saw herself fully for the first time, this is your moment too. Like, comment, and subscribe, because the next part is the legacy itself. The moment Elena's appointment as chairwoman of Dunham Technologies went public, the markets trembled. Not because of fear, because of speculation. What would she do next? Merge Dunham and Horizon? Step back from one to protect the other? Sell off assets and go global? Everyone wanted to know the move. But Elena wasn't playing chess. She was building a network. Her first order of business wasn't flashy. It was architectural. She created a new internal structure, one that connected Horizon Core's innovation hubs directly to Dunham's infrastructure teams. Not a merger, not a takeover, a weave. Shared ethics protocols, joint venture committees, employee co-ownership of joint patents, transparent open-source portions to invite academic partnerships. It was the most radical corporate fusion the industry had seen in 20 years. And it worked. For a week. Then came the counterstrike. On the morning of Dunham's annual innovation report, a new headline dropped. TerraVox makes $1.10 billion bid to acquire Horizon Core IP and assets. Elena's phone exploded with calls. Chloe burst into her office, nearly out of breath. "They're serious," she said. "This isn't a rumor. They filed with the SEC. They're targeting our investors." "Who leaked our valuation?" Marcy asked. "Doesn't matter," Elena replied. "They want to fracture us. Buy out the Horizon vision before it becomes untouchable." TerraVox was known for one thing: expansion at all costs. They'd swallowed 3 green energy startups in the last 18 months. Every time they gutted the teams, rebranded the tech, and sold to governments who didn't care about ethics, only speed. Now they wanted Horizon, because Helios had worked, because Project Atlas had proved scalable, and because the quiet genius was no longer quiet. Elena called an emergency try-to-board session between Dunham, Horizon, and Northwell Partners. She laid it all out. "This is not just a hostile bid," she said. "It's a reputational hijack." One investor asked, "Can't we just refuse the offer?" "We can," Elena said. "But the media won't see refusal. They'll see weakness." Another executive murmured, "They're already seeding doubt in press cycles that we don't have the capacity to scale Atlas globally." Chloe slammed her notebook shut. "We do, and we're going to prove it," Elena said. She proposed a move no one saw coming. A full integration of Project Atlas into U.S. regional energy infrastructure, beginning with 3 pilot cities, within 90 days. It was bold. It was dangerous. And it would either make the TerraVox offer laughable or break Horizon entirely. Simmons raised an eyebrow. "That timeline is suicide." "No," Elena replied. "That timeline is survival." The next morning she flew to Washington, D.C., not for Congress, not for headlines, but for mayors. She pitched the 3 pilot cities, Tulsa, Detroit, and Sacramento, on the Atlas Energy overlay. "We'll take the risk," she told them. "No public cost. You provide access. We deliver infrastructure." One mayor asked, "What's in it for you?" She looked him in the eye. "A future that belongs to people, not private capital." Within 5 days, all 3 cities signed letters of intent. TerraVox's press campaign shifted tone, then got quiet, then disappeared. No official withdrawal, no statement, just silence. Because you can't buy what refuses to be sold, and you can't beat the woman who already built the proof. Back in her office, Elena looked at a whiteboard where someone had scribbled the phrase, "Horizon, built to share." She crossed it out, wrote something else. Shared, not sold. That week, she stood before a unified employee town hall, 4,000 staff between Dunham and Horizon. "I know this feels like a war," she told them, "and maybe it is. But it's not about power, it's about purpose. We didn't come this far to become someone else's product. We came this far to prove that brilliance and ethics aren't opposites. They're a blueprint." They didn't cheer. They stood, silently, together, and Elena knew. That's what legacy looks like. Did you feel it? The resistance, the clarity, the absolute refusal to sell out. That's the story we need today. If Elena's stand moved you, like, comment, and subscribe. The endgame is near, and you'll want to see it through. The rollout of Project Atlas in the 3 pilot cities made international headlines. Tulsa reported a 23% increase in renewable grid stability within the first 2 weeks. Detroit slashed its peak outage frequency by nearly half. Sacramento began beta testing the system to monitor and respond to real-time temperature stress on its grid, and it worked. What was once a secret blueprint had become a functional revolution, and in every article, on every panel, and in every late-night news segment, one name echoed: Elena Gray. But behind the scenes, Elena was fading. Sleep had become a luxury she rationed. Meals became protein bars between boardrooms. Her calendar looked like code, colored blocks layered hour by hour, city to city. Chloe noticed it first. "You've lost weight," she said one morning, watching Elena pace through a dry meeting rehearsal. Elena brushed it off. Stress metabolism. Marcy noticed next, the slight tremble in her hand when she signed documents. "You okay?" "Just over-caffeinated." But the truth came crashing in one Friday afternoon, right in the middle of a stakeholder Q&A. Elena stood at the podium, answering a question about grid redistribution limits when the room tilted. Not dramatically, just enough to make her blink twice. Then her vision tunneled. She reached for the water glass and missed it entirely. The glass shattered on the floor, and so did the silence. She collapsed. Chloe was the first to reach her, then security, then a medic. Within 10 minutes, Elena was in the back of a private ambulance, her vitals spiking, her breathing shallow. Diagnosis: severe physical exhaustion, dehydration, elevated blood pressure, and work-induced cardiac strain. Not a heart attack, but a warning. She woke up in a private hospital suite hours later. Chloe sat beside her, eyes red. "You scared the hell out of us," she whispered. Elena tried to sit up. Chloe gently pushed her back. "Nope, you don't get to be stubborn this time." A nurse entered. Elena gave her a look. "I have a meeting in an hour." The nurse raised an eyebrow. "No, you don't. Your team canceled everything." Marcy's voice rang from the doorway. "And if you touch a laptop, we're locking it in the nurse's cabinet." Elena smiled faintly. "You all turned into a coup while I slept." "No," Chloe said. "We turned into you, the part of you that cares more about people than performance. And right now, you're the people." Later that night, Simmons called. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "For what?" "For not telling you sooner. We all leaned on you too hard. We expected you to carry a company, a lab, a legacy. But no one asked if you could carry yourself." "I thought I could," she said honestly. "You did," Simmons replied. "But even Atlas needs stabilization points." The next morning, a delivery arrived. A small wooden box. Inside was a note. "For the genius that forgot to breathe. Charles." And beneath it, a device she recognized from the archives. Charles's original hand-built breathing timer, a simple analog tool he used when prototyping for too many hours at a stretch. She'd read about it in his journals. She never thought she'd hold it. Now she did. Elena stayed off-grid for 10 days. She turned off email. Let Chloe and Marcy lead the next phase of the Atlas expansion. Watched the team thrive without her hand-holding. And finally saw the truth. She hadn't built a system that needed her. She'd built a system that could survive her. That could grow, live, endure. On her last night at the recovery villa, she wrote in her private journal, "Brilliance isn't about how much you do. It's about what you leave behind and who's ready to carry it." The next morning she returned. No parade, no cameras, just a woman in a hoodie, walking through Horizon Labs with a cup of herbal tea and no makeup on. She smiled, because she wasn't just back, she was balanced, and for the first time in a long time, whole. If that moment spoke to you, if you've ever carried more than your heart, could hold and still kept moving, like, comment, and subscribe. Elena's not just building a legacy, she's becoming one. It was a Tuesday morning when Elena made the call. She stood at the center of Horizon Core's central conference hall, sunlight pouring through the high glass panes, casting shadows of steel and vision. Her voice was calm. Her decision was final. "I'm drafting the legacy clause," she said. The room fell silent, because everyone knew what that meant. The legacy clause was something Charles Dunham had written but never enacted, a proposal, buried in the third journal of his private archive, outlining a unique model of succession. Not inheritance, not election, meritocracy by action. The clause stated that when the time came, the leader of any Dunham initiative would name their successor, not by bloodline vote or tenure, but by proven alignment of values and execution under fire. Elena had found the clause months ago, and now she was ready to invoke it, not because she was stepping down, but because she was planning forward. She didn't want another Margaret versus Elena situation. No secrets, no suspicion, no collapse. She wanted a future with structure. Chloe and Marcy were the obvious contenders. Both had been by her side from the beginning. Both had led Atlas through chaos. But Elena had one more move in mind, one last quiet test. She called them both into her office. "Starting next week," she said, "I'm stepping away from operational leadership for 30 days. Chloe blinked. "Wait, what?" "I'll observe. I'll support. But I won't lead." Marcy leaned forward. "What's the catch?" "No catch," Elena replied. "This is your lab now. This is your test." The next 30 days were fire, not chaos, growth. Chloe took on systems management, expanded the AI fail-safes inside Atlas, and initiated a new coding partnership with MIT. Marcy led negotiations with international energy coalitions, securing early interest from Norway, Ghana, and Indonesia. They worked together, not against each other. No titles, no egos, just execution. And it was beautiful. At the end of the 30 days, Elena called a closed-horizon Dunham staff session in the courtyard. She stood on a small platform, wearing simple jeans and a white blouse. No blazers, no podiums, just presence. 4 years ago, she began, I was fired in front of half of you. Not because I failed, but because I was quiet. Because I didn't shout. Because I didn't fight back in the moment. She looked at her team. At that time, I thought leadership was something you earned once. But I was wrong. Leadership is something you renew, every time you step out of the way so others can rise. She turned toward Chloe and Marcy, both seated front row. Today, I invoke Charles Dunham's legacy clause. Not because I'm leaving, but because I'm building a future. She paused. In 6 months, Horizon and Dunham will jointly appoint a CO chair strategy, the first of its kind in either company's history. People began to stir. And then Elena said the words, "The next generation of this empire will be led by Chloe Martin and Marcy Dunlap." Gasps, applause, and even tears, because everyone saw it, felt it. The decision was earned, and Elena? She smiled with no regret, only peace. Later that evening, Chloe sat beside her on the rooftop lounge. "You sure about this?" she asked. "Absolutely," Elena said. "You're still young, you know. Most people grab power and never let it go. I didn't grab it," Elena replied. "I rebuilt it." She looked out over the city skyline. "And now I give it to the people who watched me do it and never flinched." The next morning, Elena walked into her new office, not as CEO, not as chair, but as something else. The plaque on the door read, Chief Architect of Legacy and Learning, a title she wrote herself, because now, her job was to teach what she had learned, to pass it on, to tell the story, so that others could start sooner than she did. If this moment of selfless succession, of generational uplift, struck something in you, like, comment, and subscribe. The end is near, but Elena's legacy is just beginning. The letter came in a white envelope, no logo, no return address, just her name, Elena Gray, handwritten in a script she hadn't seen in years. She paused, stared, then opened it. It read, "I know I don't deserve your time, but if legacy means anything to you, meet me, 1 hour, the old rooftop, M." Her fingers froze. M. There was only one M who would ever dare be that cryptic. Marcus Delroy, the former CEO, the man who fired her in front of an entire room, the man who once told her genius wasn't palatable, and now, he wanted a meeting? She should have thrown it away, ignored it. But curiosity, it's a powerful thing, especially when you've won. So she went. The old rooftop hadn't changed much, still overlooked the industrial skyline, still had that rusted air duct that buzzed during the summer. He was already there, older, smaller, sitting alone on the same bench he once occupied like a throne. When he saw her, he stood, awkward, unsure if he should extend a hand. She didn't offer one, just stood, still, measured. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said. "I'm not sure I should have." A long pause. Then he gestured to the bench. "Sit, please." She sat. Not because of him, because of herself. Because sometimes closure requires a seat. "I followed everything," he began. "Every article, every rollout. Atlas, Dunham, the claws, all of it. She said nothing. He continued, "You made it work, not just work, thrive." Still, she stayed silent. Marcus exhaled. "I owe you something I should have given you years ago." Now she turned to face him. "Which is?" He looked at her. Really looked. "I'm sorry." For a moment, it didn't land. Because apologies that come too late tend to echo instead of land. She narrowed her eyes. "You humiliated me. In public. For optics. I know. You let people rewrite my work. I know. You said I was replaceable." He looked down. "I said that because I was scared." That part stopped her. She hadn't expected it. Scared of what? He turned toward her now, not as a man with power, but one stripped of it. "Scared that you were everything I wasn't, that you could lead with truth, not fear, that people would follow you because they wanted to, not because they had to." He paused. "And scared that you'd make me irrelevant." She looked at him for a long time, then said, "You did that part yourself." They sat in silence. Not hostile, not warm, just real. Then Marcus reached into his coat, pulled out a folder. "What's that?" "My final stake in Dunham, unsigned. I never cashed it out after the merger. Legally, I could still sell the shares." She tensed. "And you're telling me this because—" "I want to give it back, not sell it. Gift it." "To who?" "To the Horizon Innovation Fund. Under your name." Elena blinked. "You're serious?" He nodded. "I want something good to come from all this. From my failure." Elena took the folder. Didn't open it. Just held it. "I won't thank you," she said. "You don't have to, but I'll use it." "Then that's enough," he replied. He stood, paused. "I meant what I said, Elena. You built something rare. Protect it." She nodded once. He walked away. No hug, no handshake, no fake reconciliation, just a man disappearing into the shadow of the genius he tried to silence. That night, Elena added the folder to the archives. Under a new label, Redemption, offered, not earned. 2 days later, she held a press conference. Announced the Marcus Delroy Horizon Fund, a permanent grant for underrepresented engineers, scientists, and system thinkers. Fully endowed, zero ownership strings, just access. When the press asked about the name, she said, "Sometimes we rewrite the future by confronting our past. That's what this fund represents. Not erasure, but evolution." After the conference, she sat with Chloe and Marcy at a small wine bar. Marcy raised a glass. "To legacy." Chloe added, "To healing." Elena smiled. "To rising." Quietly, powerfully, completely. They clinked glasses. And just like that, the last ghost was gone. If you believe that even broken bridges can sometimes be crossed with the right truth, like, comment, and subscribe. We're almost there, and the final chapter awaits. The event was invite only. No press, no live streams. Just 300 of the most promising minds in American energy, tech, and climate science. All flown in, all chosen, all curious. They sat inside the Horizon Dome, a space once used for product showcases and experimental exhibits. Now, it had been transformed. At the center stood a single podium. Above it, one phrase glowed in soft white letters. "The future is built by the quiet ones." And standing beneath it was Elena Gray. She wore no jewelry, no title tags, no expensive tailoring. Just a simple black dress and silver heels. Minimal, strong, intentional. When she stepped up, the crowd quieted. You could hear hearts thumping. Elena took a slow breath, then began. "When I was 24, I built a system that got me fired." People chuckled. "I was told I was too technical, too introverted, too theoretical. I was told I didn't fit the face of leadership." She looked across the crowd. "I didn't argue. I just kept building." Pause. "And now, here we are." A slideshow began behind her. Footage of the blackout data before Project Atlas, grids collapsing in real time. Then, overlays of Atlas's rollout, stabilized zones, emergency prevention, children studying under lights that once would have flickered off, faces of engineers in rural labs, mechanics installing smart cables in Detroit, Single mothers studying STEM on scholarships funded by Horizon. When we built Horizon, Elena continued, we weren't chasing power. We were chasing proof that if you give genius a place to breathe, it will light the world. She turned. And now, I want to give you that place. A ripple moved through the audience. She gestured toward the back. A wall of steel doors slowly opened. Behind them, glass-enclosed workstations, labs, private AIs, full stack, engineering pods, and the one sign that made everyone sit forward. The Genius Archive, a new division of Horizon, built for thinkers, for doers, for the quiet ones who had ideas but never a platform. This, she said, is yours. Chloe and Marcy stood beside her now, hands clasped. We're funding it fully, no strings, no ownership grabs. You don't owe us loyalty, just brilliance. Applause began, then grew, and by the time Elena raised her hand to quiet it, some were in tears. Afterward, people came to her, one by one. A young woman from New Mexico, who built a cooling panel out of cactus fiber. A teenage boy from Vermont, who reverse-engineered a solar panel to double its capacity. A retired black engineer, who had left the energy field because no one listened, now ready to teach again. Each one shook her hand. Each one thanked her. Each one saw her. That night, she sat alone in the archive's observation deck, overlooking what she'd created, sipping tea, and watching the next generation begin. Chloe entered. You all right? Elena smiled. More than all right. You did it, Chloe said softly. No, Elena replied. We did. And now? They will. Her phone buzzed. A message from Simmons. The board voted. It's unanimous. Your official title now reads, Founder of the Genius Archive Initiative. She smiled and responded, Tell them I accept, but tell them the name means nothing if we don't keep building. A week later, the first cohort moved in. 50 minds, 50 dreams, 50 chances to prove that power doesn't have to be loud, it just has to be real. And as Elena stood, watching them take their first steps into the future, she whispered to herself, Let them rise, quietly, powerfully, without apology, because that was the true end, and the greatest beginning. If this story moved you, if Elena's journey reminded you that genius can be quiet, fierce, and world-changing, then like, comment, and subscribe. At Mr. Favortales, we believe stories shape hearts, and some stories shape legacies.